Let me just kick it off.
Oh, boy.
If I can have everybody's attention. Appreciate that. Real special treat tonight. We wanted to obviously get through dinner. And then what we have is basically a town hall scenario set up where Guy and I are going to grill Danny for all of his trade secrets. So you can go home and knock them all off. Now, we're going to get to spend this time. It's unscripted. Guy and I are just going to let Danny flow with what we ask. We want to talk to him about his background, talk about what his successes. What Danny and I talked about earlier were a lot of his failures and which he learned from and what made him who he is today. And so we ask you all sit back, you enjoy, and maybe at the end we'll even entertain some questions out in the audience. All right?
Great.
Okay.
Well, Chris, you're the CEO, but can I have the first question?
Go ahead.
All right, good. Danny, how does it feel? How does this feel?
Do I have to stand up to answer?
No.
No, I'm going to sit down. But how does it feel to see so many people that are colleagues that have so much admiration for you and what you've accomplished and what Union Square Hospitality Group stands for, and to see your staff and the Turning Stone staff do such a phenomenal job with this dinner? How does that make you feel tonight?
Well, I'll tell you, first of all, Guy and Christopher and everybody at Maine's, you guys are awesome. Do you guys realize, how unusual it is to have a company that has an agenda? Obviously, they want to sell more product to you. We all want to sell more product to a whole lot more people. Just name it. But you guys come out hugging. And you come out hugging with passion. And people want to get hugs right back. And so it's just, you can feel it. So Guy, when you say, how does it feel? I'm feeling like I'm the, one end of a battery, but it's alive. And there's a lot of great stuff happening. And I felt that from the minute that I arrived here earlier today. And I just want to say thank you for welcoming me and Carmen and Gene from Union Square Cafe. We're so proud to have the opportunity to be here and just be with you.
That's great.
Thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about the history of Union Square? It started with Union Square and where you are today and all of the different restaurants that make up Union
Sure.
Square Hospitality Group.
I don't know everybody's story in this room, but obviously I think we all feel a kinship because there are people who say this is the hardest business in the world. I honestly don't know if that's true because when you're lucky enough to find the business that you really love that comes naturally to you, we're all just paid to be problem solvers, right? And we are solving problems in an arena that we like. We like being around food. We like being around beverage. We like being around people. And so for some reason, I got it in my head because I was a poli-sci major at Trinity College in Hartford, Connecticut, that I was supposed to be a lawyer. And I never woke up one day in my life saying, gee, I can't wait to be a lawyer. And unfortunately, I didn't figure out till the night before my LSATs that I really didn't want to be a lawyer. And so I took the LSATs. I honestly have no idea how well I did or not because I never applied to one law school. And this business for me was like a mosquito bite. Everybody said don't scratch it, but I just didn't have a choice because I just wanted to be around food and wine and people. And back in 1985, when Union Square Cafe opened, it was not considered the kind of career that, my parents had sent me to a good school in St. Louis and a good school for college. And I had to do some explaining. And the first courage I got was to say I was going to be a chef because it was considered to be a higher fulfillment of their expectations to become a chef than if I were going to become a restaurateur. Restaurateurs, for whatever reason, were not trusted. Restaurateurs kept 3 sets of books. We had 5 sets of gold teeth. And so I I just didn't care. You know, I did go to learn to cook because I tried to trick my parents into thinking I was going to become a chef. And that has always stood me in good stead. I've always surrounded myself with far, far better cooks than I ever could have been. But I never lost my love for cooking and for food and my respect for what it takes to do that. And meanwhile, I just was lucky to find my calling, which is that for whatever crazy reason, give me 20 people, I can tell you who are the 3 happiest, who are the 3 unhappiest, and I'll find a way to make the 3 unhappiest into the happiest. I love doing that.
That's great. It's actually, that's great. How did you tell mom and dad that you were not going to law school and it was going to be hospitality in the restaurant business?
I don't know if I ever did tell them. I think I just did it. I had been a salesman right when I moved to New York, selling electronic tags to stop shoplifters of all things, which I knew I did not want to do for a living. But it was, even those 3 years were a great experience because I was in my early 20s and I was the top salesman in the company. And I got to learn all the bad neighborhoods in New York, which had some of the best ethnic food in all of New York. And I got lots of ideas for things that I would want to do later on in my life. I think I told them I didn't want to be a salesman. And I said, between now and when I figure out what I want to do, a friend just got me a job as an assistant lunch manager at a seafood restaurant. And, you know, I pumped up how fancy the restaurant was. It's in a new advertising neighborhood in New York called the Flatiron. They're going to call it the Flatiron District. And I just don't think I ever said, this is what I am going to do. I think I just did it.
Just happened.
Yeah.
Well, I have to tell you, excuse me 1 second. Interestingly, Guy was a biology major at Wilkes University and was going to dental school. What he did is moved his mother to Florida, and she still thinks he's a dentist. So you might have learned from his route.
20 years later.
That's better.
We, as you know, we talked a little bit about the theme of our food show, and it was this big road trip. And really what we were trying to do is inspire our customers as well as try to educate and get our customers to really be open-minded about what's going on in the industry. And quite honestly, I think as I understand it, Union Square Cafe, you were inspired by your time in Italy and your time in France, and that's really how you got started with your first restaurant.
It is because, actually getting back to your earlier question, my dad had been in the travel business, and I realized I didn't answer your question honestly because I completely blocked it out. My parents were in the process of getting divorced after about 25 years, and this was right about that time. And so I just divided and conquered because my dad was in the travel business, and I knew he would be very, very happy, actually, if I went to work for him. And so he hired me to be a tour guide in Rome. And so the whole time I spent as a tour guide in Rome, I was spending all my time in restaurants. And then he hooked me up with two of the hotels he did business with in Bordeaux. And that's where I got to cook. And that's where I got to go learn about wine. And that's where I got to go learn about shopping and farmers markets and meat markets. So there was a supporter that I had early on in the process. But, you know, I just got to kind of bring it back to Maine's and my love for Italy, my love for France. And what we were trying to do tonight, it's not just Italy the country and it's not just France the country. It was really the trattorias of Italy and the bistros of France. And what we tried to do tonight, and Eamon had a lot to do with this, and Guy certainly had a lot to do with this, was to say, how could you turn a huge room like this into a sense that you came home? And it doesn't really seem possible when you just look at the square footage in here and the number of human beings in here. But by starting with the way you would start at a trattoria, which is platters of food to be shared, which then foster a sense of talking to each other and using the table as a place for people to be we're all people who do too much in our lives. So any opportunity you can be a human being as opposed to a human doing, and you can use food as the centerpiece to do that, we wanted to do. And, you know, we knew that the hors d'oeuvres that you had were really nice tonight, but we knew that that was not going to be the star of the show. But they did what they were supposed to do, which is they got people to talk and to be together and to share. And then what I also love so much about the trattorias and bistros is a sense of generosity. Christopher and I were having a talk earlier. I think that we're all obviously in an incredibly tough business where pennies count, and you know sometimes you are comping positively to last year, and some weeks you're not, and you're looking at labor, and you're looking at tougher challenges hiring people, and sometimes that means paying more overtime than you want to pay, and there can be a tendency, I know, on a lot of operators' parts to say, I know what we'll do, we'll cut back our portion size a little bit, or we will put one less piece of bread in the bread basket, or we'll give a smaller portion of butter, or whatever it happens to be, or we'll use a lower quality of olive oil. And I've just learned year after year after year that those lessons from the trattorias and bistros was always about generosity. It was always about the second pass with the tray of, you know, the roasted eggplant and zucchini. Because if you cleared your plate, it obviously meant you wanted more. And there was always someone to offer more. And so I think that when you fill up a person's plate, you don't have to worry if they're going to come back. You just don't.
Very well put. You know, one of the things that's interesting in our culture, in particular in the United States, is that we are all in a rush, and we've advanced with so much technology that we now text each other from each side of the table instead of talk to one another. And then, but then you go over into Europe, and my experience is that every meal is a socialization opportunity. They want you to come together and celebrate and talk, and they'll do siesta and shut down at 2 o'clock and enjoy it. How did you look at that experience and come back into our culture? And just so what you described tonight, what was that kind of, you know, we've been talking about reverse engineering. You put a vision out there of saying, hey, I want to create this experience at the table, and you talk so intelligently about, you know, how you started with the hors d'oeuvres and the passing, and that forces an interaction by the mere fact of saying, excuse me, would you like some? But talk about that, how you reverse engineered that whole socialization aspect and when you first started, and how you continue to keep that alive today. Because I see that in every one of your concepts. There's still that, it's not solely about the food. The food is a means to an ends.
That's a big question.
Don't ask me to repeat it because I can't remember it.
Well, I think we believe so strongly that we so see it the way you see it, Christopher, which is we believe in something called plan from the happy morning after. So how do we want to feel tomorrow morning? That's how we plan every single thing we do. We say, how do we want to feel? How do we want our staff to feel tomorrow morning? How do we want our guests to feel? And I promise you that Carmen and I had talks like this as we were thinking about tonight. What do we want you guys to be saying tomorrow morning? What do we want you guys to be saying tomorrow morning? And then to ask ourselves, all right, now that we've named that we want people to say, that was a good use of time, I had fun, I tasted some things I had never had before, you know, I got to meet some. There's a lot that we want you to feel that honestly has nothing to do with us. Our job is just to kind of foster your opportunity to be with each other. I honestly feel that 95% of what you guys go home with from this conference is going to have to do with what you did with each other, not having anything to do with what you ate or what we said tonight. So we had those talks, and then we said, all right, so great. And that's how we planned Shake Shack. One day I sat in a room and I said, what's the vision? And I said, I want lines of people till 11 o'clock at night. And what do you have to do to make that happen? And then that really kind of forces you to think through all those things. And it doesn't make, just because you visualize something, it doesn't make it easy to then reverse engineer it, but it sure gives you a much better chance. And it almost always comes back to every single thing we plan, comes back to the fact that we have a team of people that we need to get this done. You know, there's 9 people on a baseball team. Lord only knows how many cooks made that amazing meal in the kitchen, but there was a lot of people, how many amazing servers were here tonight. It almost always comes back to how does our staff feel? Because whatever that vision is for tomorrow morning, I promise you, it will never be any better than the experience that the employees and the staff had providing it. There's no way you can ask your employees to fake it if they don't feel good about it. If you truly care about the guest experience, it's like a chef saying, you know, I've got this great recipe and not caring about picking good ingredients and handling those ingredients with respect. So whatever it is we're reverse engineering always comes back to the team. So I'll tell you right now, it was important to me as soon as I walked in here this evening for the sound check, when I saw this amazing group of servers over there with their pre-meeting, and I had an opportunity just to feel what they were going through. I didn't add a darn thing, but I promise you, it mattered to me to feel it, to know it, to say hi to them, to show some respect. And one other quick example. We served on Monday night the biggest dinner we've ever served in our career. It was 4,400 people at the Javits Center for the Robin Hood Foundation. And we had one goal. Our visualization was that 4,400 people would say, there has never been a better meal for 4,400 people in the history of the world. Just a small little goal. I think we did it, but how do you then engineer that? So I'll get into, I don't want to get into all the details, but suffice it to say we set up 4 separate kitchens that each only had to put out a meal for 1,100 people. We had 700 waiters. But I would say most importantly, we brought in our top maitre d's and hospitality naturals from Union Square Hospitality Group. And their job that night was to be the people to check in all of these waiters at 3 in the afternoon. Because we said that as opposed to most other companies or events where it's going to be, show me your ID next, show me your ID next, we wanted each one of the servers and cooks who came in that night to feel like they were as important as all the millionaires who were going to the Robin Hood Foundation event. Some of those millionaires started with B, by the way. And we said that if the people working feel amazing, we almost don't have to worry how they're going to make the guests feel.
You know what? It definitely deserves a round of applause. What's very interesting about that is it parallels another quick story. Pete Carroll, the Seattle Seahawks, when they talked to him about what did he do so differently for them to win the Super Bowl, he took his team of people and said, listen, I need to care about the welfare of everything that surrounds the player, from what schools their kids go to, you know, do their wives want to work, not work, you know, what kind of doctors, all those things. So he had people specifically to start to take care of all that so the player, even down to tickets on game days, so the player can focus on nothing what he was teaching them, and it culminated in one of, you know, an outstanding performance. And to hear you say that same parallel, and I think everybody here needs to understand, is it's all going to come back to genuinely caring about the welfare of your people, and everything will come back in spades, right?
Yeah, and your people are the raw ingredient of hospitality, which you heard on the tape earlier, we think is 51 parts of this 2-ingredient recipe. And the raw ingredient that you start with is the, you know, that's the core of your performance. So your people and your raw ingredients, well handled, well treated, well respected, you're going to get a lot closer to getting that 100 points than if you don't do that.
So I want to switch gears, ask you another question. And guys saying, hey, I'm the chef, why don't I get to talk? Explain the structure today. You can go back to previously, but as Union Square Hospitality Group, and you talk about chef being a managing partner, do you mind sharing with everyone what that structure is and why it's successful for you and how you were able to explore the concepts that you are and how it's benefited you in that structure?
Sure. I mean, at the very, very beginning, and I've said this earlier tonight, Union Square Cafe was the one restaurant I had for the first 10 years of my career. Union Square Cafe will be 29 years old at the end of this year. Gramercy Tavern will be 20 years old in July of this year. And so at the beginning, there wasn't a structure. It was just, you know, I would show up for 16 hours a day, and I don't think I was a very good leader. I think I just did what I hoped other people would do. I didn't do anything intentionally. It was all intuitively. I don't think I was a good coach. It was basically leadership by monkey see, monkey do. And then when there was Gramercy Tavern 10 years later, which I promised myself I would never open a second restaurant, but this young, skinny chef with a lot of hair named Tom Colicchio, some of you may have heard of him. He's no longer either of those two things, but he continues to be a very, very excellent cook. But his restaurant had gone out of business called Mondrian, and he loved Union Square Cafe, and he said, you know, I would love nothing more than to do a restaurant with you. And, you know, that would be like, I don't know, Shaquille O'Neal saying, may I please play on your basketball team? And you're going to go, no? Of course you're going to say yes. So I finally got over my, you know, the gips of not opening a second restaurant, and I did Gramercy Tavern with Tom. And now all of a sudden I had to call it something. For some reason I came up with the name Union Square Hospitality Group, even though I don't think two things can be a group. But I didn't want it to be my name on it, but what I hoped was with two restaurants, the restaurant number 2 would be as good within its niche as restaurant number 1, that restaurant number 1 would keep getting better, not worse, and that I had just started to figure out that hospitality was really our core competency, and just for the first time had named for myself, and I was starting to name for our team because I had to, because now wherever I was not somewhere else. So I had to start teaching explicitly as opposed to just intuitively. And that was the year that I came up with the notion that no one had ever taught me, which hospitality is a completely different subject than service. You know, if you open the Zagat survey, you see food, decor, and service. And every year we would open the Zagat survey, Union Square Cafe would do so much better when voters were asked, name your favorite restaurant, than Union Square would do when voters would say, name the best food, the best decor, and the best service. So the year Gramercy Tavern opened, Union Square Cafe had worked itself all the way up to number 2 as New York's second favorite restaurant, right behind the Four Seasons and right above Lutece, which is a big deal back then. And yet, I think our food score was only number 10, and our service score was only number 11, and our decor was 65. So you go, you know, and that's not bad out of 26,000 restaurants, but how does 10 plus 11 plus 65 divided by 3 equal 2? You know, so that was the year when I said, what if there's something that Zagat is not asking people about? And it just hit me like a lightning rod that the secret ingredient in our sauce was hospitality, that the way you make someone feel is completely different than how well you do what you do. And that service is a wonderful and critically important element in any experience, whether you're renting a car or going to a supermarket or checking into a hotel, going to the bank. But what service does and what it says is, did they do what they said they were going to do? You know, did the dry cleaner get your clothing back Thursday in a box, just like you asked for it? If they do that, they have good service. In our business, did we get the right food to the right person, at the right table, at the right temperature, at the right time? Did we get your coat back as opposed to someone else's coat back? Did we make you wait for your reservation or not? Those are all elements of service, and service is technical stuff we do. Service does not begin to describe the emotional experience people want on the receiving end of the service, which is they want to feel like we're on their side. And so what's great about hospitality is that you can literally customize hospitality differently for every single human being, because the act of being on your side is completely different than being on your side. In fact, the more of Christopher's questions I answer, I'm on your side, but I'm not on your side. But seriously, I got to tell a quick story. Right after I wrote my book, Setting the Table, I went to Chicago to the National Restaurant Association show. And I had no experience with this public speaking stuff at all. And so much so that I made the mistake of waking up at 3 in the morning to catch a 5 a.m. flight to get there in time for the 9 o'clock speech in the morning. You don't do that. That's a bad idea. And fortunately, it was sponsored by Coca-Cola, so I was mainlining Coke first thing in the morning to wake up. But the first question I got after my talk was a French guy. Is anyone French here tonight? It's okay if you are. And he gets up, and in front of about this many people, he says, you know, I don't buy this hospitality stuff. I'm not going to do my French accent right now. And I go, I had learned one crowd technique in my training. I said, say more about that, as opposed to, what do you mean? And he goes, you know, I was in a restaurant here in Chicago last night, and you Americans do way too much hospitality. And I don't think it's universal. It may work for you guys, but it doesn't work for us. Say more about that. And he goes, well, first of all, my waiter introduced himself. Hi, my name is Stephen. I mean, come on, we don't do that in France. It's ridiculous. And then he said, and then the sommelier came up, and all night, every time I took a sip, he pours another. And then every time I take a sip, he asks me how I like it. Is everything okay? And he just wouldn't leave all night. And he said, that is too much hospitality. And we don't like that. And so I go, let me just ask you a question, sir. Did you feel like the server was on your side? And he goes, on my side, I wanted to kill the guy. And I said, if you didn't feel like he was on your side, that wasn't too much service. Excuse me, too much hospitality. That was too much service. That was zero hospitality. Because service is a monologue. Service is what you do for everybody the same way all the time. But hospitality, and this is really what separates, I think, championship, any kind of business, not just us, not just hospitality businesses, but the ability to have the emotional skills to say that every transaction at its core is, at its basic, if you want to say it, is you give me money and I give you food. But that doesn't distinguish us. Anyone can do that. Any monkey can give you food in exchange for money. I think what makes us champions at what we do is making the food better, charging the proper amount of money, but even more importantly than that, asking yourself, how do I take this transaction with a human being and make it an interaction with a human being? How do I make it something where it matters to me who that person is, that I may or may not be right, but I'm trying to gauge with all of my senses, why are they here? What are they hoping for? What's going to make them leave here happier even than when they got here? And that has nothing to do with you give me food, I give you money. That's a whole other realm. And the companies that are doing that in our business, you know, grocery stores that do that, you guys have Wegmans up here and, you know, lots of Whole Foods. Those are experiential companies that are thinking deeply about those very topics. And we need to do the same thing.
Is that what you mean by when you say one size fits one? What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, what that means is that if I'm defining hospitality as something that only exists if the person on the receiving end truly feels that I'm on their side, and we take for granted that every human being is completely different, just like every snowflake is completely different, being on that French guy's side would have been leaving him alone. I can promise you that same night in that same restaurant, there was someone who needed more attention and wasn't getting it. And I think if that restaurant, if that sommelier had the emotional skills to, you know, to do a custom experience. Hospitality is a customized experience where one size fits one, where I'm going to take care of you by giving you less attention. I'm going to take care of you by giving you more attention. I'm going to take care of you by letting you show off in front of your guests. I'm going to take care of you by teaching you about wine because I feel that that's what you want. You know, whatever. That's what I mean by one size fits one.
Now, do you hire for those emotional skills,
Yes.
or do you train the emotional?
No, you have to. I think you have to hire the raw product, and again, it's like it's such a privilege to have so many culinary people in the audience, because you guys know exactly what I mean. You'll never, you can have your grandmother's favorite recipe for bolognese, but it's never going to taste any better than the worst ingredient you put into it. And even if you get good ingredients, you better handle them really well and treat them with technique. So it starts with the raw product, and we try to hire people who have what we call a very high HQ, a high hospitality quotient. We know what the 6 emotional skills are. This is an art. It's not a science. But people who have a high HQ, like an IQ. I don't know what my IQ is, but it's the same today as it was 30 years ago. You don't get a different IQ based on learning more, but your IQ does determine the ease with which you learn, right? Your HQ doesn't change over time, but you can certainly learn to express it more. So someone with a high HQ is someone whose greatest pleasure in life is providing pleasure for someone else. That's not in and of itself a good thing. And, you know, I've got friends and relatives who I would say have low HQs, and I love them to death. I would just never hire them. And, but if we could stock our team with people whose greatest pleasure is providing pleasure, that would be like owning an automobile that the more you drove it, the more it filled itself up with gas. And the 6 emotional skills that are always, always present at a very high level with someone with a high HQ, and it's basic second-grade stuff, but it's optimistic kindness, it is curiosity, it's work ethic, it's empathy, it's self-awareness, and it's integrity. And when you get someone who's a great pasta cook, and they also have all those things, we're gonna kill the competition. And it's fun. It's just much more fun to win. Now, you can't train those emotional skills, but you can train how to hire for them. And then the other thing I would say, and we've learned this year after year after year, it's the old bell curve, which is that there are some people who you could keep in a closet for a month, and they're going to walk out of the closet, you know, ready to spread sunshine, because that's just who they are with their high HQ. And then you could put people, you know, under the sun lamp for a month, and they're going to come out spewing darkness no matter what you do. So fortunately, that's kind of like 5% on either side. And it's this vast majority in the middle that will go where the gravitational pull of your organization is. And I would say one of the biggest lessons we've learned over the years is to, this is not teaching HQ, but it's shining sunlight on HQ. So when somebody knows that taking care of people, especially people on our team first and our customers second, is going to get you more sunshine, the gravitational pull of our company goes towards the high HQ. When we made the mistake earlier in my career, and I'm still guilty of this from time to time, of paying attention to the weeds, you know, the people who aren't doing their job well, and not paying as much attention to the stars, the gravitational pull goes where the sunshine goes. And so as bosses, we have to look at ourselves as sunshine, and we have to look at our staff members almost as sunflowers, girasole. And they go where the sun is, and the weeds go where the sun is too. So I would just say, hire to the best of your ability for HQ, and then shine as much sunshine on those who have it, and ignore the other ones, because then your flowers just kind of crowd out the sunlight that the weeds get, and they all leave.
So
very well put. Hey, and to my staff, you'll love this. I was able to share my opinions on Panera Bread with Danny earlier, and they're all shocked right now that I actually told you that story.
Are we all shorting Panera Bread tonight?
We are. So we were talking earlier, Danny and I, and we were talking about the physical plant. And when you do that vision of creating the perception to the guest that allows them to have the high hospitality experience. And Danny told a great story about one of his Shake Shacks. Would you share that with everyone, please?
Yeah, with great embarrassment, sure. So I was explaining to Christopher we were talking about generosity, and I was really, really upset a few months ago. I walked into one of our Shake Shacks, and there was, I think someone, I know what it was. We're converting, for better or for worse, frozen crinkle-cut fries to fresh hand-cut fries. And for those of you who do it, you know that it's absolutely insane because there is complete variability in fresh potatoes. It takes up 3 times as much room in the restaurant before you cut them. You have to wash them to get the starch off. You have to fry them once, hang them, fry them a second time. And then people say, why didn't you just cut the bag open and do that? You know, which would have been a lot easier. So anyway, I'm walking into one of our Shake Shacks, and we're training one of our cooks with these new French fries. And I saw something that just completely turned my stomach. A guest had ordered French fries. I mean, it happens every minute. And the server, or the French fry cook, has just poured a bunch of fresh fries into the bin, takes a spoonful of them out, puts the paper French fry boat on top of a scale, pours the French fries in, looks at the scale, and takes out 2 French fries in full view of anyone who would have wanted to see that. And it just completely turned my stomach. And I guess you wanted me to tell that story, so I'm really happy to have gotten to tell you the story. But, you know, it became a great teaching opportunity, which is that, for one thing, if anything, if you're going to have a scale there and you purposefully have a scale there, the only thing that cook should be doing in full view is adding French fries, for one thing. But I don't even think you should have a scale because you've got a boat, which is its own governor. I mean, you can't overfill it that much, can you? Gravity does tend to work with French fries just like everything else. And I just think that, I recently had the privilege of joining the board of directors of the Container Store, which is a great company. And one of their guiding principles is fill the other man's basket and it will come back into your own. And it's literally what I was not seeing with our French fries. But a great teaching moment because sometimes you got to see things that just feel wrong, trust your gut, and correct it right then or there, and then turn it into a much bigger teaching opportunity. So these mistakes, if you handle them the right way, and actually let the person who made the mistake feel like a champion because they gave you a lesson. As long as someone makes a mistake that doesn't lack integrity, and as long as they will learn from it and will give me and others the opportunity to teach from it, they're a champion.
I appreciate that. You know, and that goes to that when you talk about hospitality, I think some people mistake the fact that, you know, portioning is not a bad word. Like you said, the boat was built to do that. You know, but let it do its job. And then, you know, the guest, you know, feels good about it, about the experience. And again, it's the visual. It's part of that whole equation. But that really intrigued me when we talked about that earlier. I appreciate you sharing that embarrassing moment.
No, that is, but it's also a great opportunity to learn from because we do need to portion. We can't, you know, be profligate with the way we're running our restaurants. But if that's the case, then what I would do if I were designing something like this would be, if I had a sandwich shop, for example, I would probably do a trick, and I would have just the exact right amount of meat on the, you know, the tissue or whatever that piece of paper is. That's your business. And I'd put it on the bread, and then in full view of the customer, I'd have another pile of meat, and I would routinely add 2 pieces to that. Same portion I would have expected, but I want people to see that they're getting more, not less.
Great lesson.
Great. We have a lot of customers that have been successful with one restaurant, and they're thinking about a second restaurant. Some have 2, they're thinking about the 3rd restaurant. Very interesting for me to learn that you have a set of criteria that you look at that's very important for any project that you look at. And I think one of those items that you look at is lunch. Lunch is very important for any project that you go into. Can you just talk a little bit about the criteria and your checklist when you're looking at a project?
Sure. It's a tough thing because it's the things we don't do that make us more money sometimes than the things we do. You've got to really start by, for me, the top criteria is, does it really get you excited? I've made some mistakes by saying yes to things that made other people excited but didn't make me excited. And if I'm not going to get my all of my imagination, all of my passion, all of my love, all of my energy behind something, that's a good reason in and of itself not to do it. But now I'll turn the coin over. If I do have passion, I feel like the next best reason to do something, a second thing, which I think is what you're asking, or a third thing, or a fourth thing, is if there are people on our team who are passionate about it, where they're ready to grow, and if they grow, then other people on their team are going to get to grow. Because one thing we haven't talked about tonight is culture, but culture is the best definition I've ever heard of culture comes from Walter Robb of Whole Foods, who's so simply said, culture is the way we do things around here. And every single company has a culture. It could be a really good, healthy culture. It could be an unhealthy culture, but culture is the way we do things around here. And if you know what your culture is, if you know how you want things done, how you want things to feel around here, then if you can, in a second project, promote people who actually are your culture carriers over and above how good they are at what they do. These are people who do things the way you would want them done, whose judgment is consistent with your judgment, whose ideas may be different or better than your ideas are. That's where the fun comes in, because when we do a new restaurant, I always want it to feel like it's part of my family values, but I also want it to surprise me with what it knows how to do that I never could have done. And so I'm passionate. I've got people who are culture carriers who are ready to grow. Obviously, it's got to be a good business deal, because I can kill our culture if you think about yogurt, which is full of live cultures. Now put that yogurt in a frying pan, it's probably not going to do that culture any good. And I think if you put great people in a bad business deal, it's like putting them in the frying pan, and that's not going to do them any good either. So I'm passionate. I've got the right people ready to grow. And that's huge. We never open a new Shake Shack without bringing mother yeast cultures from one of our existing Shake Shacks into the next one. And that really helps. Good business deal. I also love the idea of going into a neighborhood that is emerging. When it's possible. I love to go to a place where if our place worked, and this gets back to the reverse engineering question, that if our place really worked and it really drew a lot of people, that it would actually help to build that community and build that neighborhood. And the benefit is manyfold. Number one is, if you can do that, employment is great for the community. You get in at a lower rent. You've proven that it can work, so now you get competitors. And when you get competitors, you will actually get busier. You will also have a built-in advantage, because they're going to be paying higher rent. And because they're paying higher rent, they don't have as much money to pay better managers like you do. and so that's worked out really well. And then the community ends up, feeling very, very positively about your place as well.
Thank you.
So let me ask you, with respect to, you've got such an unusual approach in everything that you do and what you create under Union Square. Who do you look to inspire you? How do you assess competition? Who do you, and the second part of that is, who out there is somewhat mature that you look at and you think is doing a very, pretty good job in how they're approaching the market? And do you have any emerging concepts that you see out there that are on the horizon that you think are pretty interesting and should be followed?
Well, I think we all need mentors and we all have to look up to places. I tend to look outside of our industry as much as possible because I think that we're all trying to break out of the pack. And it's not that we don't all have a lot to teach each other in terms of, you know, the day-to-day stuff that we all have to deal with. We all have regulations that change all the time. You know, there's always a health inspector up, you know, in one of our kitchens. In fact, yeah, I think we had one today, as a matter of fact, at one of our places, and they got an A, which is great. But I think that we all owe it to ourselves. I say this to our leaders all the time, to try to become tomorrow the company that, if it only existed, would put us out of business today. So the frustrating thing, but also the fun thing about doing well at whatever you do is that we're in a day and age where you're going to get copied immediately. As soon as you do something innovative, fresh, unexpected, somebody's going to take out their smartphone and take a picture of it and send it to their, you know, to their chef or to their colleagues or whatever, and your great idea is no longer your great idea. And that goes, I do that myself all the time, believe me. There's great ideas everywhere, not just in restaurants. So it's kind of a long answer, but I guess what I'm trying to say is that we can't rely upon just ourselves, because otherwise it's just going to become this one homogeneous industry where we're all doing the exact same thing. We've seen this in the hotel industry. You know, I'll never forget the year that the Four Seasons hotels decided to give away free shampoo. This was in the 1970s. And then every hotel chain had free shampoo. And then Four Seasons said, I know, we'll add conditioner. Every restaurant had conditioner. And then they did shoe shines and newspapers and concierges and gyms. And at a certain point, if we all just become a big commodity, who needs us any longer? So a lot of the inspiration that I find actually comes from design that has nothing to do with restaurants, or with company culture that has nothing to do with restaurants. And then just asking, I promise you, someone is, one of the things that I love most about Union Square Cafe, and I give Carmen and his team so much credit, Carmen's partner, Sam, who's the managing partner of Union Square Cafe, how do you take a 29-year-old restaurant in a city whose first name is New, and we're old, and keep it feeling relevant, and keep it feeling fresh, and keep it improving? You know, when Union Square Cafe opened in 1985, you had Le, La, and Eel restaurants on one hand, if you wanted to eat well, and then you had chains like TGI Fridays on the other. But it was so easy because there was nothing like Union Square Cafe, where you could eat good food with great wines and knowledgeable service and pay 40% of the price of the Midtown fancy French restaurants. Now our city alone has 400 restaurants just like that in the whole country. You know, every city in the country has its own version of a Union Square Cafe, which is awesome. It's an American bistro with, you know, some European influences. And so how do you constantly stay a step ahead? And I guess at the end of the day, the biggest inspiration is so boring, but it's so powerful. It's called the golden rule. And with every single trend that's going to come and go, you know, plate sizes and shapes have changed 50 times in 30 years. Plating technique has changed 50 times. This ingredient is in, this ingredient is out, this spice is in, this spice is out. But the one thing that never goes out of style is people want to be treated, you know, as if you're on their side. And so that's what we come back to all the time. So it's funny, I get letters all the time from clerics, priests, rabbis, monks, and they think that there's something religious about all this. And I don't think it is. I think it's the best of humanity is really what it is. And that's what I love about all of you guys. And I know that's why you go to work every day, because we give hugs because we want to get hugs. We are people who obviously need them, and so we're really, really good at giving them. And as long as we keep doing that, that's all the inspiration we really need, I think.
Danny?
Very well answered.
You talk a lot about engaging with your customers and communication. How has Union Square taken social media, and what social media strategies, Twitter, Facebook, have worked really well for your group, and what's your perspective?
So it's at DH Meyer. Okay, you guys all have that? That's my Twitter account. And then there's at Chef Carmen Q. That's his. And why don't you put us to the test? Give us a tweet. I promise you I will have them all answered. It won't be an assistant. It'll be me. There's a whole lot of you here, so I can't guarantee you how many hours it's going to take me, because I do intend to sleep tonight. But we listen. We respond. We use Twitter really as a listening tool. And I would say that we do a lot more listening than we do speaking on Twitter. So imagine if in your business you could have an ear that heard the first thing said as soon as someone leaves your business, right? Wouldn't that be cool? You know, because the first thing people say when they leave is usually like, I don't ever have to go back there again, or that was great. I can't wait to tell the Joneses or something. Or I love the dinner, but it was so expensive. Whatever it is they're saying, wouldn't it be cool to be able to hear that? Well, that's what Twitter gives you the chance to do. And Twitter basically gives us 3 opportunities that we wouldn't have if it were not for Twitter. Number one is that we can eavesdrop on conversations being had about our businesses. And we can act on them. And sometimes we can act on them in real time. I've had situations where, you know, someone was, and by the way, I don't want to paint this picture that all we do is strike out, but, you know, service is interminably long at name the restaurant. And we can actually get someone on that in real time. Now, that was a conversation that would have been had anyway. It's not my fault that human beings are now doing this through dinner, but if they're doing that and that gives me a chance to hear it, I'd rather know about it than not know about it. And obviously I can't be in all of our restaurants, but we have a system so that whichever one of us sees that gets it to the person who can take care of it. Many of the comments that we hear are incredibly positive. That gives us a chance to write thank you notes. That gives us a chance to have a dialogue with our guests. So that's one way we do it, and all you have to do is search your business, and you'll see there is stuff being said about it constantly. I like Twitter a lot more than I like Yelp, because on Yelp you can't really have a dialogue, and you don't really know who the people are. So Yelp can be hand grenades, and they can hurt. Sometimes they can feel good, but you can't engage with people. The other thing that's awesome about Twitter is you get to be the editor of your own magazine. And so you pick all the topics you want to learn more about in real time, and you pick people who can teach you stuff about that. But you get to make your own magazine with your own interests. It could be politics, sports, food, philanthropy, music stars, whatever you want your magazine to be. I don't think Twitter for business should be combined with Twitter for personal. And so when I say stuff on Twitter, it's never about my family. Or maybe I've done it twice, but it's almost always things that I think are going to make people find our restaurants more interesting. If you're only promoting what you do, if all I ever did, like yesterday, I learned by listening, and I follow Union Square Cafe, big surprise. And I learned from Union Square Cafe that this is National Burger Week. I didn't know that. Did you know that, Carmen? Yes. And so Carmen posted a beautiful picture of Union Square Cafe's burger, which is the first burger we ever did. And it gave me a chance to retweet it to my followers and to say, here's where it all started, all you people that think that life started with Shake Shack. It all started with Union Square Cafe 29 years ago. If all I did, though, was to promote stuff that we did, and I didn't also say other things, like retweet other people's commentary, I don't think I would be taken very seriously. So finally what it does, and this is what I love the most, is that there are people who would like to ask me a question sometimes, or who want to tell me that they loved a dinner at this restaurant or that restaurant. I get a chance to say thank you. What a big invention that is. And if it weren't for Twitter, I wouldn't know about the good, the bad, the ugly, the Metza. I just wouldn't know about these things. And so now I get to know more, I get to learn more, I get to fix more. And I get to, the best of all is I get to throw lighter fluid on fires that I want to be bigger. So if someone's saying really good stuff out there, I can make that fire bigger.
That leads to, and it was mentioned in the video, it leads to your philosophy of ABCD. Always be collecting dots. Can you talk about that? Because I just think that's so intriguing and makes so much sense.
Yeah, I'm just an information junkie, and I think we all are to a certain degree. I think that it's impossible to be alive in the internet age and not kind of always want to go one step further and learn a little bit more about somebody. And I don't mean in a voyeuristic sense, because you're nosy, but what if you knew one more thing about somebody that you could make a connection to make an even richer, more memorable hospitality experience? And it's inexcusable in this day and age when so much is knowable to not move even further from that, you give me money, I give you food transaction. I think we should be ashamed of ourselves if that's the business we think we're in. That's just it's so not special. And so information, collecting dots, and then connecting dots. One thing I love that's been going on at Union Square Cafe forever, we have a whole bunch of publishers in our neighborhood, and so there's always authors coming in. And we try to know who the authors are each day, and we happen to have the flagship Barnes & Noble half a block away. And so when we know an author's coming in, we will go buy that author's book, put it at the front of the restaurant. Authors have huge egos. And ask them to sign it on the way in. And now it is their favorite restaurant forever, and their publisher will not bring any author to any other restaurant besides ours. And it also is interesting for the rest of our guests to see, to see that someone special is eating in the restaurant. There's just little things you can do that are thoughtful, that make use of information that you cared enough to get, and then you cared enough to put to use.
Give us some more examples, because it's just so intriguing. And you also use your POS system to assist in that, in getting information.
Right.
How do you go about
we use OpenTable. I went on the board of OpenTable in the year 2000 when they were just kind of out of a garage. And I don't know if anyone here uses OpenTable, but it's a electronic reservation book that keeps a database of everybody who dines with us. We can see where they sat, who their favorite server is, when their birthday is, what their allergies are. We now have a system to tell us a whole lot more things, like what they ate, what they drank last time. We can share that information between our restaurants. We can know that somebody likes a bright table, somebody likes a dark table, someone only likes to sit in a corner. We can know when the last time somebody came in. We can figure out which of our restaurants are generating more repeat business than others, because we think that the the worst thing that can happen in the restaurant business is what we call a foul experience, which is first and last. You know, it's one thing to go to a theater, and most of us are not going to see a Broadway play more than once, but we need people to eat in our restaurants more than once. And so we've learned that the first experience is the most powerful, because we look at if the reverse engineering thing is, let's turn this person into a regular guest, which means at least 5 times a year, you won't even qualify unless you win the first round of the tournament, which is the first visit. And in the old days, the only way we knew it was your first visit is if you asked us where the bathroom was, right? But now we can tell that, and we think about, what do we want to do specially on your first visit? What do we want to do specially on your second visit? What do we want to do specially on your third visit? Without you knowing it, so that each time it just gets to be a little bit more special. And then by the time you come there 10 times, you run out of tricks.
I look out and I see young culinarians. I see young chefs, people that are just starting their career. What words of wisdom do you have for them? What advice can you give?
Well, now that my hair is so gray, I'm allowed to give advice. I don't really have a lot of advice. I have one advice, and that is, know why you're doing this, and make sure that make sure that whatever that reason is that you're doing this is truly because it pleases you to please other people. Because you will never run out of a good day of work, if that's what you love to do. If that doesn't really please you to please other people, and you look at yourself in the mirror and you say, you know, I've just had enough of this, you got to listen to that, because you're actually not only doing yourself a disservice and you're doing your whole business a disservice, but you're doing this whole industry a disservice, because we are counted on to provide hospitality. We are, you know, I think our industry is completely underrated. The amount of hardworking people who really bring it from their hearts every single day to their teams, to their communities, to their suppliers, to their guests. It's really a remarkable thing we do. We are, in many cases, the first place that people get a job in this country. We're the first people who teach accountability and being part of a team in a country that, you know, no longer has an army with a draft system. We teach service. I'm not saying we put our hearts on the line for our country, but I do think we perform a really important thing. And it starts with you, and it starts with me, and it starts with, if I can't get joy from providing joy to other people, then it's time to quit. That would be my advice.
You are such an inspiration. You really are. You really are.
Thank you.
Take some questions from the audience.
Sure. Before we do that, I have one quick question. Rumor has it Shake Shack started as a hot dog cart in Madison Park. Is that really true?
Yeah, that's not a rumor. That's the truth. We had a hot dog cart for 3 years, and we lost $5,000 our first year, $7,500 our second year, and we broke even our third year. And then in the fourth year, we got rid of the cart and turned it into a 20-foot by 20-foot kiosk. And in addition to Chicago-style hot dogs, we just added burgers and shakes and sundaes, and that became Shake Shack. And then we had one Shake Shack for 5 years. We paid our rent back into the park, Madison Square Park. In fact, we built the building with philanthropic funds we raised. So we gave the building to the park so the park could become our landlord. The goal was never, ever to have a chain. The goal was to bring people to a park, and therefore the park would be safer, and the park would make some money from it.
There's the community element you talked about.
Absolutely, as was the hot dog cart was part of an art show that we brought to the park to get people to use the park, because when people use a park, it's safer. And after 5 years, the line was so damn long that we said we should try to cannibalize ourselves and open a second one.
How many do you have today?
Globally, there are 47.
Wow. And now there's some secrets. You know, I understand there's a secret menu.
There's no, we're not In-N-Out Burger. That's on the West Coast. But our secret menu is ask for whatever you want. And if we have the ingredients in-house, we will do it. So if you want, you know, if you want fried pickles on your milkshake, we'll do it for you. I don't think you do, though.
No, we don't. No, that doesn't work.
That's great. Yes, how about some good questions?
First of all, Danny, hi, Eamon Lee, corporate chef, Maine's Paper and Food Service, and now very proud to be associated with Maine's Paper and Food Service. Thank you for, first of all, for coming out and sharing your passion, but I do have one important question. Chefs love to reduce things, and you seem to have reduced something, which is that hospitality, and you call it the virtuous cycle of enlightened hospitality. Could you expand on that a little bit more? Because I find it very interesting as to how that whole thing works, because I think there's something there that's very important for everybody in this room to hear. Thank you. Thank you.
You did a great job tonight. To the degree that you guys liked your dinner, that was the architect right there. So I think I did touch on this a little bit earlier, but a virtuous cycle is obviously the opposite of a vicious cycle. A vicious cycle, one bad thing keeps leading to something even worse. So I wake up in a bad mood and I take it out on the dog, and the dog eats my kid's homework, and the kid's late for school. Kid gets in trouble with the teacher, the kid comes home, gets in trouble with my wife, I get in trouble with my wife. That's a vicious circle, okay? A virtuous cycle is the opposite, where one good thing just keeps leading to something even better. And so I guess we just figured out a long time ago that if hospitality, the way we make people feel, was our core competency, not taking away anything from our food and our service. We have 25 James Beard Awards, so we're doing something right. But if hospitality was the thing, then the question was, how should we prioritize who gets it first? And we came to the realization that, guess what? We have the exact same 5 stakeholders as every business on earth. The people whose lives are impacted by the choices we make. But the cool thing is that the 2 most powerful things a business can do to determine whether it will perform here, here, or here, the 2 most powerful things you can do are how well you pick your team. It's just like when you're a kid playing touch football, right? Like 2 people argue who's going to get to be captains. I was always really good at picking teams, and so that always gave us an advantage. I was never the best guy on the field. But the other thing that you can do to impact the outcome is you can play with the rules a little bit. So once you see your team, you can go, is it 2 hands below the waist? Is it 1 hand above the waist? Do you have to count 5 Mississippi before you rush the passer? You're not changing the basic rules of football, but you can still play with the rules. And so in our business, if we pick the best team, and the way we impact our rules is to say, who gets hospitality first? And that's our virtuous cycle. And we learned that counterintuitively, if we wanted the most happy customers possible, the single best thing we could do would be to put our customers second. And if we wanted the happiest investors possible, the most powerful thing we could do is put our investors 5th. And that was really odd, but that was based on this virtuous cycle that your guest will never be any happier than your staff. They can't be. So we put our staff first, and we hold our staff accountable for how they treat each other. That's the highest order of business in any of our restaurants. When I go into any of our businesses, I promise you the first thing I'm looking at is our staff. And I look at, in the same way that you would look at follow through for a champion tennis player or any kind of, or golfer or sport, you look at the follow through on your staff and watch what happens. Our staff members are like bumblebees or ants in a colony. They all have a role. They all need something from each other, right? Cooks need something from each other. The waiters need something from the cooks. The dishwashers need something. The bartenders need something. But watch the human follow through. And in addition to the fact that they need something from each other, what happens to their human energy after that transaction? Does the energy actually go up because of how they treated each other? Or does their energy actually go down? That's what I'm looking for. And so that's how this whole virtuous cycle starts. Because if they are creating positive human energy while doing a job excellently, I almost don't even need to worry about our guests. And if our guests are then really getting off on this energy, because it literally, you can't see it, but you can feel the difference if you walk into a restaurant with that positive staff energy, as opposed to, I guess, Panera is what you want me to say?
Thank you. That's more I'll be shorting later.
Yeah, I honestly have no problem with Panera, but I'm just going with the boss here. But you can feel the difference, and then you get more revenue. And because you have more revenue, now you can share some of that revenue with the community. You can do great stuff for your community. You can also give your staff members a chance to volunteer in the community, which exercises their high HQ hearts. You can then take better care of your suppliers, which should be good news to everyone in this room, which means that instead of being the kind of business that says, I'm doing this much business, you better give me better prices, you better give me the first delivery, how about treating our suppliers with the exact same level of hospitality that we would want to be treated ourselves, or that we would treat our guests?
Could you repeat that one more time? I do want to go off of the way you said a couple things earlier as well. My friends from State Street Grill here in Clark Summit, we were talking about competitors coming into the area. And I really found intriguing what you offered about, you know, you said it earlier today when we were talking upstairs. You said, hey, a rising tide lifts all boats. And you know, one of the things that Floyd Maines taught all of us at Maines was don't ever fear competition, beat competition. And you should invite that in, because one thing it is going to lift the area because it's going to bring a lot of business in. But it really does, it challenges you, makes you be better. And I really thought that hit home, because we talked earlier about that whole competitive pressure. And I really enjoy your perspective with regards to, hey, bring it on. It's good for all of us.
And it's scary. I remember the first time after Union Square Cafe opened and someone opened another restaurant 2 doors down, I felt like another dog had peed on my tree. You know, sorry for that reference there, but it was like, you know, I wasn't happy about it at all until I learned that every time someone did that, we just got busier. And so now what we do is when someone new moves, you know, within a block or two, which in Manhattan, for all I know, that's like 2 miles to you. But if we get a new restaurant on the block, it's expected that we're going to cook family meal for their staff within the first week that they open. And it's a great way, you know, it's what you would want if you were moving into a home or to a neighborhood yourself. And you'd be surprised. Good stuff happens when you treat it that way.
That's great. I'll tell you the other message, too, is regard to community. So much of your success has been a function of trying to improve neighborhoods, which you did at Madison Square Park. And, you know, almost in your virtuous cycle, it's a paying it forward. I'm going to take care of it. It's going to come back. And I think that's outstanding. And I don't think any of us think enough about that. You know, even in using the example of State Street Grill, we were talking about Depot Street that's behind it. And, geez, I wish they would brick pave it. And it would just lift the whole area and the whole community up. And that's a message that I hope, you know, we were talking earlier, you could take 3 things away generally from a session like this. And I really hope that sense of community, if not any of all the many great things you've offered today, they take that away, because it will give back to you. It will give back to you in more ways than just profits, but it will give back to you. And I really appreciate you sharing, because you really opened my eyes even to we need to be doing more of that, even in our industry. And like you said, learning so much of that from you tonight, I really appreciate that.
Awesome.
Hello, Danny. It's a pleasure to be here.
Nice to
in
meet
your
you.
presence. My name's Patty Litwinick. I work in the Lower Hudson Valley. I worked 10 years in Manhattan for the Santos Group, so now I'm really aging myself.
Sign of the Dove, Arizona 206.
Arizona 206.
Contrapunto.
Contrapunto.
I knew all your restaurants.
Yellow Fingers. I operated them all. In any event, I am huge about hospitality. Absolutely a maniac about it. If there's not someone there at the door to say good night and thank you to my guest, I'm a maniac. My biggest question to you is how do you get your back in front of the house to integrate and cooperate and be a team?
Yeah, very good question.
It's a crucial question because it's, I guess I don't think I've seen any of our restaurants succeed unless that's happening. They can succeed, but they can't sing at the same time. So, I think in the best cases, the chef and general manager are truly partners. And it starts right there. So it's like sales and marketing, or excuse me, sales and manufacturing. In many cases, they share an office together. I know at Union Square Cafe, Carmen, you and Sam share an office. I think that's the model that we use. You can't force people to love each other, but I'll tell you that if there's not deep, deep partnership and respect between sales and manufacturing at the very top, you'd be kind of foolish to expect it to happen otherwise. Then there's also, we really, really work hard to establish that the family meal that takes place twice a day, before lunch and before dinner, that everybody is sitting down, not just the waiters, as we did in the old days. But the cooks are sitting. Now, I'm not gonna tell you that people don't segment themselves off, because they sometimes do. You don't always have cook, dishwasher, waiter, maitre d', cook, dishwasher. It doesn't work like that. But the fact that people are in the same room with the same sense of community, eating together and taking that moment, that helps a lot. We look for opportunities to do things for each other. So if a cook's family had a tragedy, you'll often see the servers leading a fundraiser for that family. So it's the reason that your question got applause is that we all know that naturally manufacturing and sales are like oil and vinegar. They don't mix, but they can and must be emulsified if you really want to have, the fullness. Because how much fun is it to spend, all this passion foraging for ramps and cooking an amazing dish, and then not trusting or liking the person who served it, or resenting the person who served it? Where's the love? And isn't the guest going to feel that energy at some point? So as leaders, it's our job to do everything we can to say, it is a fact you have different personalities, It's a gross generalization, but you tend to have more extroverts in the dining room. You tend to have more introverts in the kitchen. Not always, but there are real reasons that people naturally segment, but there are much more important reasons that as leaders we have to bring them together.
Good question. Time for two more?
Two more.
Yeah, two more questions.
Anybody in back? Right there?
I just want to thank you for coming out here and saying yes to Maine's request, and I want to thank them for asking you. I have to say that nothing happens by accident. This isn't a coincidence that we're all sitting here, and I'm listening to what you said. The unfortunate thing is I played too many games without a helmet, so I'm not remembering all the things that I want to.
I think the bar is open late tonight.
I was going to stand up and say, hi, I'm Jim, and I'm a recovered alcoholic, but I didn't go there. But anyway, all jokes aside, is this being recorded by any chance?
Wasn't part of the contract.
Not me, but the...
Maybe not by us, but every phone in this room is on right now. Jim, so God love you.
No, I honestly mean that. Is this talk being recorded that we could watch it at a later date?
It's not.
It's not.
Okay. Then is it in the book? Yeah, you said 5 or 6 things that are the staples of...
Someone with a high HQ.
Yes.
Those are all in Setting the Table, $9.95 on Amazon.
Thank you.
Somehow that's not fair. I'm short-selling Panera, and you're now, what, longing Amazon? Is that what it is?
I don't think Amazon's going to make a lot of money on that book.
Last question.
Agreed, and we appreciate having you here. We're a restaurant group out of Rochester, running 6 restaurants. Your book, Setting the Table, sat on our shelf for, I don't know, 3 or 4 years before we actually opened it up. And this past year, we opened it up and put it into action.
Was it still fresh?
It was great. And we put it into action for a plan for 2014. And just going through that material was incredible for us. So the management team itself embraced a lot of your philosophies. And I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce this correctly because I'm not South African, but Ubuntu has become a philosophy within the restaurant that we've embraced between both the back of the house and the front of the house. But my question, I guess, is that idea of Ubuntu and having that recognition of humanness to each other in the restaurant, both with staff and our guests. When the management team gets it, how do you continue that focus in the restaurant as a whole?
Well, thank you for everything you said. And by the way, just to name it, that greeting that you were describing, Ubuntu, in the same way that I may run into somebody, walking down the streets of Manhattan or wherever, and you go, hey, what's up? Or how's everything? Which I can't stand. I don't know, some things are good, some things aren't. No one really wants the answer to that question. But the greeting, or will say, hey. What they say in certain communities in South Africa is Ubuntu, which means I see you. That's a pretty cool greeting, isn't it? And I think that's what you're saying. And I think without seeing somebody from your heart through your eyes, there cannot be genuine hospitality. We all know that. And the example I gave in the book is, on the airlines in the old days, the flight attendant would stand by the cockpit as everyone's leaving, and they go, bye, bye now, bye, bye-bye, bye now, bye, bye-bye. And they're not talking to you. That's not Ubuntu. That's just going through the motions. I think what your question is if the management staff gets it, how do you perpetuate it through the rest of the staff? Well, I'll tell you one thing, that's a hell of a lot easier than the other way. And I've actually had that problem through the years where our staff members sometimes got it even more than the managers did. And the unfortunate reasons for that is sometimes that we don't have enough managers. They're not well enough trained as leaders. They are running around like chickens with their head cut off, trying to do the business, trying to be on the dining room floor, trying to, do the scheduling, trying to greet guests, trying to do everything. And they end up not necessarily walking the talk that the servers themselves have. So if your leaders have it, then it's really just a question of making it clear to everyone on the staff, this is what matters to us now. You may have taken a job that you thought was only about cooking great food with great ingredients and learning the wine list and setting the table the right way and turning the tables. But we're adding this whole extra thing because we want to compete to win. And this whole extra thing we're adding, we don't want to get a 49 on our test. We want to get 100. And to get that extra 51 points, we are now going to be championing hospitality like you've never seen before. You're going to hear about this in your performance review. You're going to be reviewed not just for what a great cook you are, but how you make people feel on the staff as well. And you put your money where your mouth is. We give bonuses based on 49 and 51. And so people truly, truly feel that. But the fact that your leadership feels it and believes it, without that, you could never do it. So with that, I think you've got a great start. So I think with that, I should say, how about a round of applause for the best industry in the entire world? There we go.
More importantly, how about a standing ovation for one of the finest gentlemen I've been able to meet in ages, Danny Meyer. Well done.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's right.
Okay. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.